What if I told you that for nearly a century, part of England wasn't ruled by the English at all? It was ruled by Vikings, not just raiders with axes, but settlers, kings, and lawgivers who carved out their own kingdom in a foreign land. This is the story of the Danelaw, when the Norse came not to pillage but to stay. In the late 9th century, England wasn't a united country. It was a patchwork of smaller Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, like Northumbria, Mercia, and Wessex, often fighting each other, and that made it the perfect target. In 865 AD, a massive Viking force landed on English shores. It wasn't just a few longships. It was what the Anglo-Saxons called the Great Heathen Army, a massive invasion force led by legendary warlords like Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Ubba. They didn't just raid monasteries. They marched inland, took cities, and demanded tribute. And they didn't leave. Instead of returning to Scandinavia, the Vikings began to settle. They captured York in 866, renaming it Jorvik, and turned it into a Viking capital. They claimed vast stretches of land in the north and east of England. And eventually, they created the Danelaw. What was the Danelaw? It was more than a name. It was a real region under Norse control, with Norse laws, Norse rulers, Norse place names. Cities like Derby, Lincoln, and Leicester all came under the Danelaw. Even the word law in English comes from Old Norse. But it wasn't just about conquest. The Vikings farmed the land, traded with locals, and married into Anglo-Saxon families. They introduced new weapons, ship designs, and even clothing styles. They brought coinage, crafts, and customs that blended with native traditions. For decades, the Danelaw was a parallel world, a Norse England inside Anglo-Saxon England. But the English weren't done yet. Enter Alfred the Great, King of Wessex. He refused to surrender. After a series of battles, and a near collapse of his own kingdom, he struck back. In 878, Alfred defeated the Viking leader Guthrum at the Battle of Edington. They signed the Treaty of Wedmore, dividing England between Wessex and the Danelaw. It was peace, but not unity. Over the next century, Alfred's descendants, especially King Edward and his son Athelstan, reconquered much of the Danelaw. They pushed the Norse back, one town at a time. But the Viking legacy didn't end there. In 1013, the Viking king Sweyn Forkbeard invaded England and won. He became king of all England, followed by his son Cnut the Great, a Danish ruler who ruled over England, Denmark, and Norway. Under Cnut, the Viking dream was realized, a united North Sea empire. Ironically, it was one of the most stable and prosperous periods in English history. But after Cnut's death, the crown returned to Anglo-Saxon hands. And in 1066, William the Conqueror, a Norman of Viking descent, changed England forever. So what remains of the Viking rule? Look at a map of England. Cities like Grimsby, Derby, and Whitby all bear Norse names. Look at the language. Words like sky, egg, and knife come from Old Norse. Even parts of English law, military tactics, and rural organization all trace back to the Danelaw. The Vikings didn't just raid and burn. They helped shape the nation we now call England. And yet, their kingdom, Danelaw, is often forgotten. It wasn't a failure. It was one of the boldest experiments in Viking history. A land seized by force but held through settlement. A Norse world in an Anglo land. So next time you think of Vikings as wild warriors on longships, remember that for almost 100 years they ruled a piece of England. And that piece never quite forgot them. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, which ancient civilization or forgotten kingdom should I cover next? Because history isn't just about battles, it's about what comes after the battle ends.